The child stopped the coronation before the crown ever touched the false Luna's head. For 5 years, Evelyn Harper had taught her twin sons one rule above all others: never show your teeth, never show your scent, and never, ever let the world know whose blood ran beneath their skin. It was the only way to keep them alive. Yet now, in the marble heart of Blackthorn Court, with 300 nobles watching and the Alpha King himself seated on the obsidian throne, little Liam Harper forgot every warning his mother had whispered over candle smoke and Silverleaf. He saw Serena Vale raise her hand toward Evelyn, saw his mother flinch though she tried to hide it, and the small boy moved faster than any child should have been able to move. One moment he was standing behind his brother, trembling in boots, still muddy from the long road out of Frostpine. The next, he was between Evelyn and the woman the court was about to crown. His teeth closed around Serena's wrist, not enough to truly harm her, but enough to stop her. Enough to make the hall fall silent. Enough to make every wolf in the room lift its head. Serena gasped, more offended than hurt, and staggered back as if a servant's child had dared touch the moon itself. "Filthy little thing," she breathed, but no one laughed with her. No one moved. The musicians froze with bows suspended above strings. The royal priest lowered the silver crown by an inch. Even the candles seemed to shrink away from the sudden weight in the air. Evelyn dropped to her knees and pulled Liam against her, one arm around him, the other locked around his twin, Noah, who stood pale and still beside her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she did not know who she was apologizing to anymore. To the court that had already condemned her. To the king who had not heard her name in 5 years. To the sons she had failed to hide. Or perhaps to the girl she used to be, the one who had once believed love could survive a throne. Across the hall, King Alexander Blackthorn rose. He did not rise quickly. He did not shout. He simply stood, and the entire court remembered why wolves bowed before kings. He was taller than Evelyn remembered, broader. Through the shoulders, dressed in black and silver, with the kind of stillness that made powerful men lower their eyes. 5 years had carved the softness from his face, but not the memory from hers. She remembered his hand covering hers beneath a palace balcony. She remembered his voice promising that when the time was right, he would name her before the kingdom. She remembered the night she was dragged from this same court as a traitor while carrying a secret so small it had barely begun to live beneath her heart. Alexander descended the steps of the throne. Serena tried to speak first. "Your Majesty, that child attacked me. This is exactly what I warned you about. Evelyn Harper returns with wild pups from the border and brings shame into your court." But Alexander did not look at Serena. His eyes were fixed on Liam. Then Noah. Then Evelyn. The air changed as he came closer. The twins pressed into their mother, not afraid exactly, but alert, as if something ancient inside them recognized an answering call. Evelyn felt the Silverleaf charm hidden beneath Liam's collar go cold. The rain from the journey had weakened it. The long hours inside the palace had burned through the rust. The scent she had buried every morning for 5 years began to rise. Pine smoke. Winter iron. Royal blood. Blackthorn blood. Alexander stopped 3 feet away. For one terrible second, he looked less like a king than a man standing at the edge of a grave he had not known he dug. His wolf flashed in his eyes, gold and stunned and furious with grief. Around them, the court began to whisper, but the sound died when Alexander lifted one hand. He crouched slowly until he was level with the twins. Liam clutched Evelyn's sleeve. Noah stared back with the same dark gold eyes that had once made nobles kneel. Alexander breathed in once, and whatever doubt the court had tried to build vanished from his face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that everyone leaned forward to hear it. "Why?" he asked. "Does this child smell like my son?" Evelyn's heart broke so sharply she almost forgot how to breathe. Serena turned white. Noah looked up at his mother, confused and afraid, while Liam whispered, "Mama, did we do something wrong?" Evelyn held them tighter, but there was no forest to run to now, no Silverleaf left to burn, no lice strong enough to cover royal blood in the court where it was born. The Alpha King looked at her at last, and in his eyes she saw anger, betrayal, recognition, and something far more dangerous than all three: hope. Evelyn swallowed the fear that had kept her alive for 5 years and gave him the truth the whole kingdom had stolen from him. Because he is, she whispered. They both are. 5 days before the court learned the truth, Evelyn Harper woke before sunrise because mothers with secrets did not get to sleep until morning. The cabin was still dark, tucked beneath the black pines of frost pine border, where the wind came down from the mountains cold enough to slip through every crack in the walls. She lay still for one breath, listening. The roof creaked. The hearth whispered. Somewhere outside, snowmelt dripped from the eaves into the empty rain barrel. Then, from the narrow bed across the room, Liam mumbled in his sleep and Noah answered with a soft little sound, as if even their dreams had learned to stay quiet. Evelyn rose without lighting a lamp. Light drew attention. Smoke drew attention. Sound drew attention. And attention, she had learned, was the first step toward losing everything. She crossed the room barefoot, careful to avoid the loose floorboard near the stove, and knelt beside the small iron pot where she kept the silver leaf. The bundle was nearly gone. Only 7 dried leaves remained, curled and brittle as old paper. 7 leaves for 2 growing boys whose blood was becoming harder to hide with every passing week. She crushed one between her palms. The sharp, metallic scent lifted at once, bitter enough to sting her eyes, and she mixed it with pine ash, mint oil, and a spoonful of rainwater saved from the last storm. When the paste turned gray, she dipped 2 fingers into it and moved to the boy's bed. Noah slept closest to the wall, one hand tucked beneath his cheek, his black hair falling into his eyes. He looked peaceful when he slept, almost ordinary, except for the faint gold at the edge of his lashes when the moon was full. Liam slept on his stomach with one fist wrapped around a wooden wolf Evelyn had carved for him from a broken chair leg. Even in sleep, he frowned like a tiny guard standing watch over a kingdom no one had told him was his. Evelyn touched the paste behind Noah's ear first, then beneath his collar, then over the pulse in his wrist. The royal scent softened. Not disappeared. Never disappeared anymore. Only softened, pushed beneath herbs and smoke and the ordinary smell of poor children in a cold cabin. When she reached for Liam, his eyes opened. Again, he whispered. Evelyn smiled because it was easier than letting him hear the fear beneath her ribs. Again. It smells bad. I know. Other kids do not have to wear it. Other kids are not you. His small face tightened, not with pride, but with the kind of exhaustion no 5-year-old should have known. I do not want to be me if being me means hiding. Evelyn's hand stilled. For a moment, she saw another boy in him, not a child, but the man whose blood had shaped his bones. Alexander had once looked at her with that same stubborn pain, as if the world had given him power when what he wanted was peace. She smoothed the paste under Liam's jaw and kissed his forehead. Being you is not the dangerous part, sweetheart. The world is. By breakfast, the sky had turned the pale gray of old wool. Evelyn cut the last piece of cornbread into 3 uneven portions and gave the largest halves to the boys, pretending not to notice when Noah quietly pushed part of his back toward her. Eat, she said. I did. You took 1 bite. It was a very impressive bite. Liam frowned at her plate. Mama, do not use that voice on me. It is your voice. Noah smiled at that, just barely, and Evelyn felt the small victory like warmth in her hands. They had so few things. 2 beds. 3 blankets. 1 cracked window stuffed with cloth. A table that leaned to the left unless Liam wedged his boot beneath it. But they still had laughter sometimes, tiny scraps of it, hidden between hunger and fear. That was what Evelyn lived for. Not hope. Hope had once worn a crown and let the court take her away. She lived for Noah's quiet kindness and Liam's fierce little heart, and the way they both still reached for her in the dark. After breakfast, Evelyn packed her healer's bag and walked the boys to Mrs. Calloway's cottage at the edge of the village. Frostpine was not truly a village so much as a stubborn gathering of people the rest of the realm had forgotten. Trappers with bad knees. Widows with more chickens than money. Young mothers whose husbands had gone south for work and never sent letters back. People who needed a healer but could rarely pay one. Evelyn helped them anyway. Need had never frightened her. Cruelty had. The first patient of the day was Mr. Bell, who had split his palm repairing a fence. He apologized 3 times for not having coins and offered her a jar of pickled beans instead. Evelyn cleaned the cut, wrapped it carefully, and took the beans with thanks because pride did not fill children's stomachs. After him came a girl with a fever, then a miner coughing from dust, then a woman whose baby would arrive before the next full moon and whose hands shook when she asked if childbirth always hurt so much. Evelyn sat with her for almost an hour, explaining every step in a calm voice, even though the woman had only 1 silver dime to place in Evelyn's palm. By noon, Evelyn's fingers were numb from cold water and herb salve. By 2 o'clock, her back ached. By 4, she had eaten nothing since that impressive bite of cornbread. Still, she smiled when people opened their doors. She kept her voice gentle. She never told them that she had once walked marble halls. She never told them that the hands now washing fever cloths had once been held by a king beneath a balcony while winter roses climbed the stone around them. In Frost Pine, she was not the woman the court had called traitor. Not openly. But rumors traveled better than roads. They lived in glances, in lowered voices, in doors that closed too quickly when she passed. At the general store, Mrs. Pike watched Evelyn count out pennies for flour and said, "Heard Blackthorn Court is crowning a Luna this week." Evelyn kept her eyes on the counter. "Is that so?" "Serena Vale, they say. Beautiful. Girl. Proper bloodline." The words were placed gently, but meant to cut. Evelyn measured them the way she measured bitterroot, with steady hands and no visible reaction. Then the court must be pleased. Mrs. Pike leaned closer. "Funny thing, you coming from there and never saying much about it." "Not much worth saying. Some folks say you were sent away." Evelyn picked up the flour sack. It weighed 5 pounds, though it felt heavier with every eye in the store settling on her back. "Some folks say many things." A man near the stove snorted. "Court does not throw out innocent women." Evelyn turned then, not fast, not angry, only tired. "No. Courts usually dress it up first." Silence followed her out into the street. She walked home with the flour against her chest and the cold biting her cheeks, refusing to cry where anyone could see. Tears were expensive. They took breath, strength, time. She saved them for after the boys slept, when the cabin was dark and no one needed her to be brave. At Mrs. Calloway's cottage, she found Noah sitting by the window, watching the road, while Liam paced like a restless wolf trapped in a child's body. Mrs. Calloway looked worried. "They felt something today," she murmured when the boys ran to get their coats. Both of them. Around noon. Noah said the air was calling his name. Evelyn's stomach went cold. "What else?" "Liam said he smelled stone after rain." Blackthorn Palace. Evelyn knew it before she could stop herself from knowing it. The bond was waking. The closer the coronation came, the stronger the royal blood in them pulled toward the throne that had never known their names. She thanked Mrs. Calloway, took the boys home, and made stew from beans, onion, and a bone with almost nothing left on it. The boys ate as if it were a feast. Evelyn told them a story about 2 foxes tricking a bear out of his honey, and Liam laughed so hard he forgot to be angry at the silverleaf. Noah leaned against her side, warm and quiet, and whispered, "Mama, did our father like stories?" The spoon slipped in Evelyn's hand. She caught it before it hit the floor. "I do not know anymore." "But you knew him once?" Liam asked. Evelyn looked at the fire. Outside, the pines bent under the wind. "Yes." Noah's voice was careful. "Was he bad?" That question hurt worse than Mrs. Pike, worse than the man by the stove, worse than every old rumor that still followed her like smoke. Alexander had failed her. He had believed the court too easily, doubted her too late, and let her walk away alone. But he had not been cruel in the way Serena was cruel. He had not smiled while someone else broke. That made the truth harder, not easier. "No," Evelyn said softly. "He was powerful. And sometimes powerful people are surrounded by voices telling them what is safest until they forget what is true." Liam poked at the fire with a stick. If I had a father, I would want him to be brave. Evelyn closed her eyes. So would I. The knock came just after sunset. 3 sharp strikes on the cabin door. Not a neighbor's knock. Not a patient's. Official. Heavy. Final. Evelyn stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. The boys froze. Through the cloth-stuffed window, she saw the black and silver cloaks of royal guards, 3 horses stamping in the mud, and 1 sealed parchment held in a gloved hand. Her first thought was not of herself. It never was. She looked at the silver-leaf pot, at the boys' collars, at Noah's wide eyes and Liam's clenched fists. Then she opened the door. The guard in front did not bow. His gaze moved over her patched dress, her healer's bag, the poor little room behind her, and something like contempt settled at the corner of his mouth. Evelyn Harper, he said. By order of Blackthorn Court, you are summoned to appear as witness before the royal coronation of Serena Vale. Evelyn reached for the parchment, but he did not release it right away. You are to leave at first light. Refusal will be treated as admission of guilt. The words admission of guilt stirred the old wound as if 5 years had been 5 minutes. Behind her, Noah whispered, Mama. The guard's eyes shifted toward the sound. Evelyn stepped fully into the doorway, blocking his view. I will be ready. Only then did he let the parchment go. The seal was silver wax stamped with a crescent and crown. Serena's family mark pressed beside the king's. Evelyn waited until the guards rode away before closing the door. Her hands did not shake until the latch fell into place. Liam came to her first. You are not going. Evelyn turned, and the lie rose easily because motherhood had taught her to make fear sound gentle. It is only a court matter. I will answer questions and come home. Noah stared at the parchment. Why does it smell like the bad flowers? Evelyn looked down. Beneath the wax and ink, beneath the cold trace of palace stone, there was perfume. White rose. Amber. Serena Vale had touched the summons herself. Evelyn felt the cabin shrink around her, felt the last safe corner of the world tilt beneath her feet. 5 years of hiding, and the court had found a way to call her back exactly when Alexander would be watching another woman take the place Evelyn had once been promised in secret. She folded the parchment once, then twice, and held it over the fire until the edge curled brown. But she did not let it burn. Not yet. Because somewhere inside that palace was the man who had never answered her letters, and somewhere beside him stood the woman who had made sure he never received them. The parchment stayed on the table long after the boys fell asleep, its silver seal catching the firelight like an eye that refused to close. Evelyn sat across from it with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached, listening to Noah and Liam breathe beneath their patched quilts. They had argued, of course. Liam had wanted to pack a knife he was far too young to carry. Noah had asked whether courts could lock mothers away for answering questions wrong. Evelyn had told them both that tomorrow was only a journey, only a duty, only a few days away from home, and she had hated herself for every calm word because children knew the shape of fear even when adults dressed it in softer language. After they slept, the cabin became honest. The wind worried at the roof. The last log sank into embers. The summons waited. Evelyn reached beneath the loose floorboard under her chair and drew out the small cedar box she had not opened in nearly 2 years. It smelled of dried lavender, old paper, and the kind of grief that never rotted because it had never been allowed to breathe. Inside were 3 things: a faded ribbon from the gown she had worn the first night Alexander danced with her where no one could see, a broken silver button from his coat, and the copy of her final letter, written in a shaking hand beside a window white with snow. She did not unfold it yet. Some wounds punished you more gently when left closed. She only touched the edge of the paper and let memory do what memory always did. It took her back to Blackthorn Palace before the whispers, before the trial, before every corridor learned to turn cold when she passed. Back then, Evelyn Harper had been no one important, only an Omega healer assigned to the lower infirmary, useful enough to be called during fevers and invisible enough to be forgotten afterward. She had not minded being invisible. Invisible women heard truth. They heard which noble drank too much before council, which guard limped when storms came, which lady smiled at court but cried in the chapel. Evelyn had built her life around quiet usefulness. Then Alexander Blackthorne, still a prince then, had come into her infirmary with a fever he refused to admit was serious and a wolf too proud to rest. He had expected obedience. She gave him soup, a blanket, and a scolding so firm that the 2 guards at the door looked ready to faint. Alexander had stared at her for 1 full second, then laughed, not loudly, not freely, but enough that the room warmed around it. That was the first mistake. The second was how often he returned with reasons that grew less convincing each time. A torn sleeve. A headache. A question about herbs. Once, absurdly, a paper cut. Evelyn had told him princes should be ashamed to waste a healer's time. He had answered that kings in training needed to learn humility somewhere. She had not fallen in love all at once. That would have been easier to forgive. She fell in love the way frost left a window in morning sun, slowly, quietly, until one day she looked up and the whole world had changed shape. Alexander was not gentle with everyone. He could be impatient, distant, carved from duty and old law. But with her, in the private hours, between court sessions and midnight patrols, he became someone almost young. He told her he hated the throne because everyone bowed to the crown and no one asked whether the man beneath it was tired. She told him she hated being an Omega because people spoke over her kindness as if kindness were proof of weakness. He said her kindness was the bravest thing in the palace. She laughed because no one had ever called her brave before. The night his father died and the crown passed to him, Alexander found her in the winter garden after the court had finally let him go. Snow fell beyond the glass roof, soft and endless. He looked lost in his black morning coat, a king before sunrise and a lonely man before midnight. Evelyn had meant only to offer comfort. He took her hand as though it were the one solid thing left in the world. When the mourning period ends, he had told her, his voice rough from silence, I will name you properly. No more hidden walks. No more pretending I do not search every room for you. Evelyn should have been afraid. Court did not accept Omega queens. Old families did not welcome girls from lower infirmaries. Serena Vale had already spent months arranging herself near Alexander like Destiny in a silver dress, and Lord Marcus Vale had made no secret of how useful his daughter would be to a new king. But Evelyn had believed Alexander. Not because he was powerful. Because when he looked at her, he seemed relieved to be seen without it. 3 weeks later, everything broke with terrible precision. A map of the western defenses was found wrapped in Evelyn's spare cloak. A witness swore he had seen her near the messenger tower. A vial of sleep draught from her infirmary appeared in the captain's cup. Each piece of evidence was too neat, too polished, too ready. Evelyn understood that at once. But understanding a trap did not open it. The court wanted a traitor more than it wanted the truth. Lord Marcus asked questions that sounded respectful and landed like stones. Serena watched from beside the dais, her face pale with beautiful concern, her eyes bright with triumph whenever Alexander looked away. Evelyn kept waiting for him to stop it. One word from him would have silenced the hall. One step toward her would have told them she was not alone. But he was newly crowned, surrounded by elders warning of rebellion, border attacks, rival packs waiting for weakness. She saw the war inside him. The king and the man. The crown and the mate. That was the first time Evelyn learned love could be real and still fail to save you. Alexander did not sentence her to death. Later, people would call that mercy. Evelyn never did. He stripped her of palace protection, banished her beyond the Blackthorn border, and ordered that her name not be spoken in royal service again. His voice did not break until the final word, but by then the guards had already taken her arms. She had tried to tell him. Not everything. Not in front of the court. Only enough. Her hand had pressed to her stomach, still flat, still secret, where a life barely larger than a seed had begun to change her body. Serena stepped close before Evelyn could speak, close enough that her perfume covered the smell of fear. Careful, Serena whispered, smiling for the court while her words slid beneath the noise. Royal blood makes dangerous evidence. Especially inside an Omega no one believes. Evelyn had gone silent. Not because Serena frightened her more than exile. Because in that moment she understood the shape of the threat. If the court knew she carried Alexander's child, they would not see a baby. They would see scandal, succession, leverage, a mistake to be corrected by laws written long before mercy had a voice. So Evelyn let them drag her away with the truth locked behind her teeth. She told herself she would reach Alexander later. She would write. She would find someone loyal. She would make him understand when the court was not listening. She did write. The first letter from a boarding room 40 miles north, her hands shaking so badly the ink spotted the page. Alexander, I was framed. I do not ask you to believe me for my sake, but for the life I carry. The second came months later, after she felt the babies move and realized there were two. I think they know your voice, though they have never heard it. I tell them you are not cruel. Please do not. Make me a liar. The third was written in the worst winter Frost Pine had seen in 20 years, after the birth came early and both babies were so small she was afraid to sleep in case their breathing stopped when she closed her eyes. Alexander, I am carrying your sons no longer. They are here. They lived. If you ever loved me, protect them. No answer came. Not to the first. Not to the second. Not to the third. For months, Evelyn listened for hooves on the road until listening became its own kind of madness. Then one dawn, while Noah slept against her chest and Liam cried with a voice too fierce for his tiny body, she understood that no one was coming. Whether Alexander had read the letters and turned away, or never received them at all, the result was the same. Her sons had only her. So she became more than a banished woman. She became a locked door, a hidden road, a false scent, a soft song during fevers, a lie told to guards, a smile offered to neighbors who asked too many questions. She learned which herbs dulled royal scent, which roads avoided patrols, which stories made boys stop asking about fathers. She learned to fear birthdays because each year made Noah look more like Alexander when he was thinking and Liam move more like him when he was angry. She learned to cut their hair shorter before market days, to keep their sleeves long enough to cover the faint marks that glimmered under moonlight, to wake from dreams where the palace found them and called it law. Evelyn finally unfolded the copied letter. The ink had faded, but the plea remained. Protect them. She looked toward the boys. Noah had curled around his pillow, his brow creased as if even sleep gave him questions. Liam's wooden wolf had fallen to the floor, and his little hand reached toward empty space. They deserved truth. They deserved family. They deserved a father who would stand between them and every cruel voice in the kingdom. But Evelyn no longer knew whether Alexander Blackthorne was that man, or whether he had buried that man beneath a crown 5 years ago. The summons on the table seemed to pulse in the dim light. Serena had called her back not as a guest, not as a healer, not as the mother of hidden heirs, but as a witness beneath the shadow of a coronation. That meant Serena was confident. Too confident. It meant whatever had been buried 5 years ago was not buried deeply enough, and whatever trap waited in Blackthorn Court had been prepared by someone who knew Evelyn would come quietly if the threat was shaped like duty. Evelyn returned the letter to the box and shut the lid. At first light, she would go. Not because the court commanded it. Not because Serena summoned her. Not because some wounded part of her still wanted Alexander to look at her and finally understand what he had lost. She would go because if Serena Vale was close enough to wear the Luna crown, then she was close enough to threaten Noah and Liam from a throne. Evelyn could survive exile. She could survive hunger, shame, and a kingdom that called her guilty. But she would not survive watching the woman who destroyed her life gain power over her sons. Outside, the wind shifted through the pines, carrying the distant smell of rain and stone. For the first time in 5 years, Evelyn let herself whisper Alexander's name. It did not sound like love anymore. It sounded like warning. By dawn, Evelyn had packed everything she could not risk leaving behind into one worn leather bag, 3 changes of clothes for the boys, 2 bundles of silver leaf wrapped in wax paper, a jar of fever salve, a bone needle, the cedar box of letters, and the little wooden wolf Liam refused to sleep without. The rest of their life had to stay in the cabin because poverty was too heavy to carry and memory was more dangerous than hunger. She made oatmeal thin enough to pour and sweetened it with the last spoonful of maple sugar because she could not bear for the boys to remember this morning as bitter. Noah watched her from the table with eyes too old for 5 years. Liam sat beside him with his arms crossed, refusing to touch his bowl. "I am going with you," he said. Evelyn tied the bag shut. "You are staying with Mrs. Calloway." "No, Liam." "No." Noah looked down at his hands. "What if they do not let you come back?" Evelyn forced herself to breathe through the sudden ache in her chest. There it was, the question she had spent all night trying to outrun. She knelt in front of them and took one hand from each boy. Noah's fingers were cold. Liam's were curled into a fist. "Listen to me. I have gone through harder things than a court full of people who like hearing themselves talk." Liam's mouth trembled, and he looked furious about it. "Then why are you scared?" Evelyn smiled, small and tired. "Because brave people are scared too. They just keep choosing what matters." "We matter," Noah whispered. "More than anything." "Then choose us and stay." That nearly broke her. For a moment, Evelyn saw how easy it would be to run. Take the boys north, past Frostpine, past the old logging roads, into the mountain towns where blackthorn law thinned and names could be traded for new ones. She could change their hair with walnut dye, teach them to answer to different names, burn every letter and every memory until the past became a story with no proof. But Serena Vale would still be crowned. The court would still hold Evelyn's name like a weapon. And one day, when Noah and Liam's royal blood became too strong for Silverleaf, the kingdom would come for them without warning. Running had kept them alive. It would not keep them free forever. She kissed both boys on the forehead and stood before her resolve could fail. "Mrs. Calloway will make pancakes tonight." Liam gave her a look of deep betrayal. "I hate pancakes." "You love pancakes." "Not today." She almost laughed. Almost. The royal carriage arrived half an hour later, though carriage was too generous a word. It was a covered transport wagon with iron hinges, meant for servants, prisoners, or people the court did not wish to honor. The guard from the night before sat beside the driver, his black and silver cloak spotless, despite the muddy road. Evelyn stepped outside with her healer's bag over one shoulder. Mrs. Calloway waited by her gate, ready to take the boys, but Noah and Liam clung to Evelyn so tightly that she had to pry their fingers loose one by one. "I will come back," she said. "Promise?" Noah asked. Evelyn had learned not to make promises the world could steal, but this one she gave anyway. "Promise." She did not see them follow. That would haunt her later, the fact that the last glimpse she had of them was through tears she refused to shed. Noah standing still beside Mrs. Calloway while Liam stared at the wagon as if he could set it on fire with his eyes. Evelyn climbed into the transport. The door shut. Frostpine began to move away. The road south was 30 miles of wet dirt, pine shadows, and memories that grew sharper the closer she came to the heart of Blackthorn territory. At first, Evelyn sat alone with her hands folded over the bag in her lap, counting turns in the road to keep herself from thinking. 6 miles to Miller Creek. 12 to the old watchtower. 20 to the stone bridge where palace patrols began. Every landmark had once meant she was getting closer to Alexander. Now each one felt like a door closing behind her. Rain started before noon, soft at first, then steady enough to blur the hills. The guard cursed and pulled the canvas flaps tighter. Evelyn was reaching to move her bag away from a leak when she heard it, a tiny sneeze beneath the bench opposite her. She froze. Another sneeze followed, muffled badly. Evelyn's heart stopped, then slammed back into motion so hard it hurt. Slowly, she lifted the hanging blanket that covered the storage space under the bench. Noah looked up at her with wide, guilty eyes. Liam lay beside him, one finger pressed to his lips as if silence could undo discovery. For 3 full seconds, Evelyn could not speak. Then every fear she had ever swallowed rose at once. "What have you done?" she whispered. Liam sat up too quickly and hit his head lightly against the wood. "We came to protect you. You were supposed to stay with Mrs. Calloway." "We did," Noah said miserably. "For 9 minutes. Evelyn pressed a hand over her mouth. Anger would have been easier if they had disobeyed for mischief. But Noah's lower lip was trembling, and Liam had stuffed his wooden wolf into his coat like armor, and both of them looked so determined to love her that she wanted to cry. "Do you understand where we are going?" she asked. Liam nodded. "The place that made you sad. The place that will hurt us if it knows what you are." Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a damp wax paper bundle. "I brought the leaves." Evelyn took it. The silver leaf inside had darkened from the rain seeping through the floorboards. Her breath caught. No, no, no. She opened the bundle fully. Half the leaves had already turned black at the edges. The paste would still work a little, maybe for a few hours, but not through a full day at court. Not inside a palace built from the same stone as the Blackthorn throne. Not near Alexander. The wagon jolted, and Liam grabbed her sleeve. "Mama?" Evelyn smoothed his wet hair back and forced her voice low. "We are going to be very careful. You will not speak unless I ask you to. You will not stare at anyone. You will stay beside me no matter what happens." "What if someone is mean to you?" Liam asked. "Especially then." His jaw tightened. Evelyn knew that look. It was Alexander's expression in miniature, the dangerous quiet before defiance. She cupped his face. "Liam Harper, your job is not to fight the world for me." "Then whose job is it?" Evelyn could not answer. The wagon slowed near the stone bridge. Voices sounded outside. The driver called to the patrol. The guard opened the rear door without warning, and gray daylight spilled over all three of them. Evelyn moved at once, pulling the boys behind her, but not quickly enough. The guard stared. His gaze went from Noah's black hair to Liam's gold-rimmed eyes, then to Evelyn's face. "You were summoned alone." Evelyn lifted her chin. "They are children. They are undocumented children crossing into royal territory. They are my sons." The word sons changed something in the guard's expression. His nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. Evelyn saw the moment he scented what the weakened Silverleaf failed to hide. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough to make suspicion sharpen behind his eyes. He leaned closer. Noah stepped back. Liam stepped forward. Evelyn put an arm across him before he could do anything foolish. The guard's attention fixed on Liam's eyes. In ordinary light, they were hazel. Under stormlight, the gold darkened at the rim, ringed by a thin shadow that looked almost black. A Blackthorn trait. Rare. Unmistakable to anyone raised beneath the crown. "How old are they?" he asked. 5. "Their father." "Gone." "That is not an answer." Evelyn held his stare. "It is the only one I have." For a moment, the rain seemed louder than the world. Then the older patrol captain rode up beside the wagon, impatient and wet. "Problem?" The guard hesitated. Evelyn felt the boys breathing against her skirts. If he said what he suspected, if he ordered a scent test here on the open road, everything would end before she reached the palace. But the captain was cold, annoyed, and far more interested in staying dry than examining two frightened children in a transport wagon. "Border healer brought her pups," the guard said at last. "Not listed on the summons." The captain glanced inside and shrugged. "Court can decide what to do with them." "Move." The door shut. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. Noah leaned into her side, silent tears on his cheeks. Liam whispered, "I did not bite him." A broken laugh escaped Evelyn before she could stop it. She pulled both boys close and held them as the wagon rolled over the bridge into Blackthorn land. After that, the road changed. The mud gave way to fitted stone. The pine forest thinned, replaced by iron lamps, watch posts, and banners snapping in the rain. Blackthorn Palace appeared just before dusk, rising from the cliffside like something carved out of storm clouds. Its towers vanished into mist. Its walls were black granite veined with silver, older than any living king, older than most stories, and Evelyn felt the old terror move through her body like a remembered illness. Noah sat forward, staring. Liam forgot to pretend he was not impressed. The weakened silver-leaf charm beneath Noah's collar warmed, then cooled, as if confused by the palace air. Evelyn smelled it too, wet stone, cedar smoke, winter roses, and beneath all of it, the deep ancestral scent of Blackthorn blood. The boys went very still. Not frightened this time. Listening. Mama, Noah said softly, why does this place feel like it knows us? Evelyn reached for him, but before she could answer, the palace gates opened. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder. Guards lined the entrance in black armor. Servants hurried beneath covered walkways. Far above, through tall windows glowing gold against the storm, music drifted from the great hall where Serena Vale was being celebrated. Evelyn stepped down from the wagon with one son on each side, her boots sinking into a shallow puddle. Her old dress clung to her from the rain. Her healer's bag felt small against the enormous shape of the palace. Every instinct in her body screamed to turn around. But Noah's hand found her left hand, Liam's found her right, and together they crossed beneath the archway into the world that had once erased her. As they entered, Liam looked up at the black stone walls and whispered, Mama, the stones know our names. Evelyn tightened her grip. From somewhere deep inside the palace, a wolf answered with a low, distant call no human ear should have heard. Both boys turned toward it at the same time. Evelyn had forgotten how loudly a palace could breathe. Frost pine had wind, creaking wood, rain on tin, boys whispering in their sleep. Blackthorn Palace had a different kind of sound, the hush of servants pretending not to stare, the distant pulse of music behind closed doors, the faint scrape of guards shifting their boots as she passed, the soft gasp of silk when noble women turned their heads. Every step took her deeper into a life that had once rejected her so completely that even the walls seemed surprised she had returned. Noah held her left hand. Liam held her right. Both boys walked close enough that their shoulders brushed her skirts, but Evelyn could feel the effort it took for them not to look around. This was not like Frostpine, where doors stuck in winter and floors slanted and neighbors measured flour by the cup because no one could afford waste. Here, the corridor lamps burned with blue-white flame that did not flicker. Silver wolves were carved into the archways. Moonstone tiles stretched beneath their muddy boots, so polished that Evelyn could see the torn hem of her dress reflected back at her like an accusation. A maid carrying a tray nearly dropped it when she saw Evelyn's face. Another servant whispered, "That is her." The words moved ahead of them faster than footsteps. That is her. The banished healer. The Omega traitor. The woman who crawled back on coronation night. Evelyn kept her chin level because she would not let Noah and Liam learn shame from the angle of her head. The young guard who had noticed them at the bridge walked behind her now, too close. His suspicion had not faded. It hung at her back like a hand she could not shake off. The older captain led them toward the great hall, where the music swelled brighter with every turn. "You will wait until called," he said without looking at her. Lady Serena asked that the witness be presented before the vow. Witness. Evelyn almost smiled. Not accused. Not guest. Not healer. Witness. Such a clean word for a woman summoned to decorate another woman's victory. "My sons will wait with me," she said. The children were not summoned. Then they should not have been permitted through the gate. The captain finally glanced back, annoyed. "Mind your tone." Liam's fingers tightened around hers. Evelyn squeezed once in warning. "Not here. Not yet." The captain stopped before a pair of tall black doors inlaid with silver branches. Evelyn knew those doors. Once, she had stood outside them carrying a tray of fever tea for Alexander when he was still a prince, waiting for a council session to end. Once, he had slipped out after midnight, taken the tray from her hands, and said all royal meetings should be replaced with soup and honest women. She had laughed so quietly then, terrified someone might hear happiness in her. Now the same doors opened for her like a mouth. Light spilled across the corridor. Music broke over them, then faltered as the first row of nobles turned. The great hall was full. 300 people, perhaps more, dressed in silver, pearl, blue velvet, winter white. At the far end, beneath banners bearing the blackthorn crest, stood the obsidian throne. Alexander sat upon it. Serena Vale stood below him on the coronation platform, luminous in a gown that seemed woven from moonlight. A silver crown rested on a cushion beside the royal priest, waiting for one final vow. For a breath, Evelyn did not see the court. She did not see Serena. She saw only Alexander. 5 years should have made him a stranger. They had not. Time had changed him, yes. It had sharpened what grief and rule had already begun to carve. His black hair was shorter, his jaw harder, his shoulders broader beneath the formal coat of a king. But she knew the stillness of him. She knew the way he held pain deep enough that others mistook it for coldness. She knew the line between his brows that appeared when he was forced to listen to fools. His eyes found her across the hall, and the music stopped completely. Not by command. By instinct. One by one, conversations died until the only sound was rain ticking against the high windows. Evelyn had imagined this moment too many times during the first year of exile. In some versions, he ran to her. In others, he turned away. In the cruelest version, he looked at her with nothing at all. Reality was worse because he looked as if something inside him had recognized her before his mind gave permission. His hand tightened on the arm of the throne. His wolf flashed behind his eyes, there and gone, bright as a match struck in darkness. Serena saw it too. Evelyn knew because the false Luna's smile tightened by the width of a thread. "Evelyn Harper," Serena said, her voice clear and sweet enough for every corner of the hall. "You arrived." Evelyn released the boy's hands only long enough to guide them behind her skirts. "I was summoned." "You were summoned alone." Serena's gaze dipped toward Noah and Liam, and for one dangerous second, her expression lost its polish. Her eyes moved over Noah's face, lingered on Liam's, then returned too quickly to Evelyn. "How touching. You brought your little border pups to witness a proper court." A few nobles laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because Serena expected it. Evelyn felt Liam shift behind her, but she kept her hand low and found his sleeve. "They're my sons. They will be treated with respect." The laughter thinned. No one had expected the banished Omega to speak as if respect were something she could demand. Alexander rose then. The entire hall bowed their heads, except Evelyn, who forgot, and the boys, who had never learned how. The absence of their bow landed in the room like a dropped glass. A court lady inhaled sharply. The young guard stepped forward, perhaps to correct them, but Alexander lifted 2 fingers and the man stopped at once. The king descended the platform slowly. Serena turned toward him, arranging concern across her face. "Your Majesty, perhaps this should wait. She has clearly come distressed, and with children who do not understand court manners." Alexander did not answer her. He stopped several feet from Evelyn. Close enough that she could see the silver thread at his collar. Close enough that the old bond inside her chest, buried under fear and years, stirred like a wound touched by warm hands. His voice, when it came, was not loud. It did not need to be. "How long have you been in Frostpine?" Evelyn swallowed. 5 years. A muscle moved in his jaw. "You never left the border?" "No, you survived there?" It was a strange question. Too soft for the court. Too late for the woman who had once waited for him until waiting became humiliation. Serena gave a delicate laugh. "She is standing here, Alexander." Clearly she survived. Evelyn looked at Serena for the first time. Really looked. The same golden hair. The same perfect posture. The same white rose perfume, richer now, layered beneath jewels and triumph. 5 years ago, Serena had whispered threats where no one else could hear. Tonight, she did not need to whisper. She had the court, the crown, and almost the king. "Alive," Evelyn said, turning back to Alexander. That was enough. The words were simple. They changed his face anyway. Not visibly to most people, perhaps. But Evelyn had once known his silences as a language. His eyes lowered for half a second to her hands, rough from herbs, cold water, winter work, and the 1,000 small labors exile demanded. Those were not the hands of a woman who had fled into comfort. Those were the hands of someone who had carried life through scarcity and never let it fall. Serena stepped closer to the coronation platform. "Your Majesty, the vow should not be delayed for old wounds." Miss Harper was called because her name appeared in records attached to the Western betrayal. Once she confirms what the court already knows, we can finally put this unpleasant history to rest. "History," Evelyn repeated softly. Serena smiled. "Yes, that is what the past becomes when decent people move on." Noah's small voice rose from behind Evelyn before she could stop him. Mama, is she the lady from your bad dreams? The hall went still in a new way. Evelyn closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Liam whispered, not nearly quietly enough, she smells like the letter. Serena's face went pale, then bright with anger. What did that child say? Evelyn turned quickly, one hand on each boy's shoulder. Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this hall concerns me tonight. Serena descended one step, her silver skirt whispering over stone. Especially when a disgraced woman brings strange children into a royal ceremony and teaches them to insult their future Luna. Liam's chin lifted. You are not ours. A sharp murmur moved through the court. Evelyn felt the world tilt. Liam. But Alexander had gone utterly still. His gaze fixed on the boy with an intensity that made Evelyn's pulse stumble. Not recognition yet. Not fully. But something older had begun to wake. Liam did not shrink. He stared up at the Alpha King as if measuring him against every answer Evelyn had never given. Noah, quieter, reached from behind Evelyn and touched the black stone pillar beside them, the one carved with the ancient roots of the blackthorn line. Evelyn felt the change before she saw it. A low hum moved through the floor. The blue-white flames in the lamp spent toward Noah. The silver branches in the door behind them gave off a faint glow, so faint that half the court missed it, but not the royal priest. He stepped back, eyes widening. Evelyn grabbed Noah's hand away from the pillar. Too late. The hall had felt him. The forbidden stone had answered a child who should have meant nothing to it. Serena saw the priest's face and moved fast, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Parlor tricks. Border witches teach pups all manner of cheap displays. He is not a witch, Liam snapped. He is my brother. And what are you? Serena asked, too sweetly. Another. Little stray trained to bare his teeth for attention. Evelyn moved before thought could stop her. Not toward Serena. Toward the coronation platform, where the moonstone basin used for Luna vows stood filled with clear water from the royal spring. No banished Omega was allowed to touch it. No accused traitor was allowed within 3 steps of it. Guards shifted at once, but Evelyn only dipped her fingers into the water and pressed them to Noah's wrist, then Liam's, cooling the faint heat rising beneath their skin. The basin should have rejected her. Sacred court magic was particular, old, and deeply unkind to those it deemed unworthy. Instead, the water brightened around her fingers, clear silver light curling over her knuckles like recognition. The royal priest made a sound halfway between a prayer and a gasp. Everyone froze. Evelyn stared at her wet hand, horrified. Serena stared too, but her horror carried hatred. Alexander looked not at the basin, not at the court, but at Evelyn, as if a locked door inside the past had just opened by itself. That water only answers royal vows, the priest whispered. Serena turned on him. Silence. But silence could not undo what 300 people had seen. Evelyn pulled her hand back, gathering the boys against her. I did not come here to prove anything, she said, though her voice shook. I came because I was ordered. Alexander stepped closer. The air around him had changed. His wolf was no longer restless beneath the surface. It was listening, reaching, remembering. Evelyn, he said, and her name in his mouth after 5 years nearly brought her to her knees. She hated that. Hated that some part of her still knew the shape of it. Who are they? Before she could answer, Noah looked up at him, solemn and unafraid. Mama says powerful people forget what is true. Alexander's face went still. Evelyn's breath caught. Serena's hand closed around the edge of the coronation cushion hard enough to wrinkle the velvet. A noble somewhere near the back whispered, those eyes. Another said, look at the younger one. The young guard from the bridge inhaled sharply, and Evelyn knew the silver leaf had weakened again. The palace. The water, the stone, Alexander's nearness, all of it was pulling the truth through every thin layer she had built. She bent to gather the boys, ready to ask for a private room, a delay, anything, but Serena moved first. Enough, she said, and the sweetness was gone now. Remove the children until the ceremony is complete. Liam stepped in front of Evelyn. Noah caught his sleeve. Alexander's voice cut through the hall before any guard could obey. No one touches them. The command struck like a door slamming shut. The guards stopped mid-step. Serena turned toward the king, stunned. Evelyn looked at him too, and for one fragile second, she saw not the man who had let the court take her, but the man from the Winter Garden, the one who had once promised to choose her when choosing became difficult. Then Liam looked past Alexander at Serena, his little face fierce with the pain of every night he had heard his mother cry when she thought her sons were asleep. "Mama," he asked, loud enough for the court to hear, "is he the man who made you cry?" The question landed in the great hall with more force than any accusation Serena could have prepared. "Mama, is he the man who made you cry?" No noble dared repeat it, but every face seemed to hold the words. Evelyn felt heat climb her throat, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden, terrible tenderness of Liam's small body standing between her and the king, as if a 5-year-old child could shield his mother from a man powerful enough to bend an entire realm. Alexander did not move. For one breath, he looked as if he had forgotten the court, the crown, the coronation, the woman in silver waiting beside the platform. His gaze dropped to Liam, then to Noah, then returned to Evelyn with something raw breaking behind his eyes. Serena recovered first. She always had. "Children say strange things when frightened," she said, her voice smooth again, though her fingers still clutched the velvet cushion. "This entire display is exactly why the ceremony should continue in private. Miss Harper has clearly raised them beyond proper influence." Evelyn's arms tightened around the boys. "Do not speak about how I raised them." A low ripple moved through the crowd. 5 years ago, Evelyn had answered questions with her head bowed, voice small, hands shaking at her sides. 5 years ago, she had been dragged through this room as a woman with no standing, no witness, and no one willing to meet her eyes. But 5 years ago, she had been alone. Now Noah was pressed to her left side, Liam to her right, and the weight of their trust made fear feel less like a prison and more like a door she could choose not to enter. Alexander turned his head slightly. "Captain Hale." The older guard stepped forward at once. "Your Majesty." "Seal the hall." Serena's smile vanished. "Alexander." "No one leaves until I say otherwise." The words were quiet. The effect was immediate. Guards moved to each doorway, black cloaks sweeping over moonstone floors. The musicians lowered their instruments. Noble families drew closer together, suddenly aware that a royal celebration had become something far more dangerous than gossip. Evelyn's breath caught. Being trapped in Blackthorn Court again should have terrified her, and it did, but not for the reason anyone might think. She was not afraid of staying. She was afraid of what staying would uncover. Lord Marcus Vale stepped from the first row of nobles, silver hair immaculate, expression grave in the way of men who enjoyed sounding reasonable while sharpening knives behind their words. "Your Majesty," with respect, sealing the court over a few childish disturbances may send an unfortunate message. Alexander looked at him. Only looked. Marcus lowered his chin a fraction, but continued. "The realm has gathered to see stability restored. Lady Serena's coronation cannot be held hostage by an exiled healer and 2 unverified children." Liam made a small sound, half growl, half protest. Evelyn touched the back of his neck. "Quiet heart," she whispered. Alexander heard her. Of course he heard her. His eyes flicked to her hand on Liam's nape, the practiced ease of a mother soothing a child who felt too much, too fast. Something in his expression tightened. "The ceremony is postponed." A collective inhale swept the hall. Serena went still. "Postponed? Until I understand what happened here." "What happened," Serena said, each word polished bright, "is that a disgraced woman returned on the most important night of this kingdom and brought confusion with her." Alexander's voice cooled. "Then confusion will be examined." For one extraordinary second, Serena looked at him as if she hated him. Then the expression disappeared beneath a wounded smile. "Of course, Your Majesty. Whatever you think is best." Evelyn did not trust that surrender. Serena had never truly surrendered anything in her life. She only stepped back when another road to the same destination appeared. Captain Hale approached Evelyn, careful now, because Alexander was watching. You and the children will be escorted to the royal family wing. Evelyn almost said no. The word rose hard and fast. No to palace rooms. No to locked doors. No to being kept near Alexander, while Serena rearranged the truth in another corridor. But Noah's skin was too warm beneath her hand, and Liam's royal mark, though hidden under his sleeve, pulsed faintly against her palm. The boys needed rest. They needed food. They needed shelter from 300 watching wolves and a false Luna who had finally seen enough to be afraid. Evelyn lifted her chin. My healer's bag stays with me. Captain Hale glanced at Alexander. The king nodded once. No one separates her from the children or the bag. Serena's eyes sharpened at that, but she said nothing. Evelyn guided Noah and Liam toward the side doors, aware of every stare following them. Not contempt now. Not only that. Curiosity. Fear. Calculation. The court had seen the moonstone water answer her. It had seen the ancient pillars stir beneath Noah's hand. It had heard Alexander forbid anyone to touch the children. Rumor would take those small sparks and build a wildfire by morning. The family wing was exactly as Evelyn remembered and nothing like she remembered. The corridors were warmer than the rest of the palace, lined with old portraits, thick rugs, and lamps shaped like silver branches. This was where heirs were raised, where queens rested, where royal blood was protected behind doors no servant crossed without permission. Evelyn had never belonged here. Years ago, she had delivered medicines to its threshold and waited for someone important enough to carry them inside. Now guards opened the doors for her, and the wrongness of it made her want to turn around. Noah looked at every portrait as they passed. Liam stared at the floor, but his little hand stayed locked around hers. At the end of the hall, Captain Hale stopped before a suite Evelyn knew by reputation only, the winter nursery chambers, unused since Alexander's childhood. You will stay here for the night. Evelyn looked at the carved door. Wolves and stars twined along its edges. A room made for children born beneath a crown. No locked doors, she said. Hale's mouth tightened. This is a royal wing. No locked doors, she repeated. Alexander spoke from behind them. No locked doors. Evelyn had not heard him follow. That unsettled her more than if he had announced himself with 100 guards. She turned slowly. He stood a few yards away, hands at his sides, the formal black of his coat making him seem part of the shadows. Without the throne behind him, he looked less untouchable and more tired. That was worse. Tired men were easier to remember. Tired men could become the ones who whispered in gardens and held your hand like prayer. Evelyn looked away first. Captain Hale opened the door. The nursery beyond was large enough to swallow Evelyn's entire cabin. There were 2 small beds with blue quilts, a low hearth already burning, shelves of books, a table set with bread, stew, milk, apples, and honey cakes. Liam's eyes went straight to the cakes. Noah's went to the beds, then to the windows, measuring exits. Evelyn hated that he knew to do that. Eat, she told them softly. Both of you. Liam hesitated. Is it safe? Alexander's breath shifted. Evelyn did not look at him. Yes. The boys moved to the table, cautious at first, then with the hunger of children who had spent a long day hiding in a wagon and pretending courage could fill their stomachs. Evelyn stayed standing until she saw Noah take the first spoonful of stew. Only then did her body remember it was exhausted. Alexander remained at the doorway, not entering, as if he understood the room could only bear so much of him at once. Evelyn. She closed her eyes briefly. Do not. I have questions. I am sure you do. And you have answers. She turned then, anger cutting cleanly through fatigue. You lost the right to demand them when you let that court decide who I was. His face tightened, but he accepted the blow without defense. That infuriated her more. 5 years ago, she had wanted him to fight. Now that he stood silent beneath her pain, some foolish part of her wanted him to argue so she could hate him more easily. I did not know about them, he said. Evelyn's laugh was quiet and empty. No, you did not. Did you try to tell me? The question was careful. Too careful. She thought of the cedar box in her bag, the copies of letters written with freezing fingers, with hope, with desperation, with a newborn son sleeping against each side of her body. She thought of the road she had watched for months. Not here, she said. His gaze moved to the boys. Liam was pretending not to listen while eating honey cake in very serious bites. Noah watched them openly. Alexander lowered his voice. Then where? Nowhere tonight. Evelyn. They're tired. I am tired. And Serena is not finished. That reached him. His eyes hardened, not at her, but at the name. You believe she is responsible for what happened 5 years ago. I know what she whispered before they took me from the hall. Alexander went very still. What did she whisper? Evelyn looked toward the boys. Liam had crumbs on his sleeve. Noah's cheeks finally had a little color again. Small, ordinary details in a room built for royal children, while the man who had fathered them stood 3 steps away and did not yet know the half of what had been stolen. Tomorrow, she said. Alexander wanted to refuse. She saw it in the angle of his shoulders, in the flare of his wolf beneath his skin. Kings were not accustomed to waiting. But fathers, perhaps, could learn. His eyes shifted to Liam's drowsy face, then Noah's guarded one, and something in him softened so abruptly that Evelyn had to look away. The royal healer will examine them tonight, he said. No, their marks reacted in the hall. I said no. If the court challenges their bloodline, I need proof that cannot be dismissed. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice so the boys would not hear the tremor in it. And I need my children to go one night in this palace without strangers touching them, testing them, judging them, or deciding what they are worth. Alexander absorbed that like another sentence passed against him. Then he nodded once. No examination tonight. Evelyn had expected a fight. The lack of one left her off balance. But a guard stays outside, he added. For protection, not confinement. Whose protection? Theirs. He looked toward the table. And yours, whether you want it or not. There it was, the pull and the wound, the impossible ache of being protected by the man who had once failed to protect her when it mattered most. Evelyn hated him for saying it. Hated herself more for believing that in this moment, at least, he meant it. A soft thump interrupted them. Liam had slipped from his chair and stumbled with sleepiness. Evelyn reached him first, but Alexander moved at the same time, instinctive and fast, stopping just short when Liam leaned into Evelyn's skirts instead. The king froze as if the distance of a few inches had become an entire lost lifetime. Liam rubbed his eyes. Mama, can we go home now? Evelyn knelt and brushed crumbs from his chin. Not tonight, baby. I do not like here. I know. Noah came to stand beside them, holding his wooden wolf. The room smells sad, he said. Evelyn's throat tightened. Alexander looked around the nursery, and for a moment she wondered if he smelled it too. Abandonment. Waiting. A childhood packed away and polished for children who had never come. You can sleep in the bed closest to the fire, Evelyn said. I will sit right here. Do not sit, Noah said. Sleep too. Liam nodded against her shoulder. You get grumpy when you do not sleep. Evelyn managed a smile. Very rude, but fair. She tucked them into the beds, leaving the lamp low and the hearth bright enough to keep shadows gentle. Liam held the wooden wolf. Noah kept one hand outside the blanket until Evelyn took it. Within minutes, exhaustion carried them. Under. Evelyn stayed between their beds, listening until their breathing evened. When she finally stood, Alexander was still at the door. He had watched without speaking, and the silence between them had changed. It was no longer only anger. It was grief with a pulse. They are beautiful, he said, almost too quietly. Evelyn did not answer. Compliments were dangerous. Tenderness was worse. He stepped back into the corridor, giving her space, but before he left, Liam shifted in his sleep and murmured, Do not let the bad Luna burn Mama's letters again. Evelyn went cold. Alexander stopped as if the floor had vanished beneath him. Slowly, he turned back. Noah slept on, but Liam's small face twisted with dream fear, his royal mark glowing faintly beneath the cuff of his sleeve. Alexander looked from the child to Evelyn, and this time there was no king in his voice at all. What letters? For a moment, the only sound in the winter nursery was the soft breathing of two sleeping boys and the low crackle of the fire. Evelyn stood between the beds as if her body alone could keep the past from crossing the room. Alexander remained at the threshold, one hand braced against the doorframe, his face carved into stillness, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of a king weighing an accusation. They were the eyes of a man who had just heard a child name the shape of a secret he had never been allowed to touch. What letters? He asked again, quieter this time. Evelyn looked down at Liam. His sleeve had slipped back in sleep, revealing the faint silver pattern beneath his skin. Not fully formed. Not ready. But unmistakably royal. It pulsed once, then faded under the warm glow of the hearth. She pulled the blanket gently over his wrist. Not here. You said that before. Because it is still true. Alexander's jaw tightened. My son just spoke of burned letters in his sleep. The words my son struck the air between them so suddenly that Evelyn felt them in her ribs. Not a declaration. Not yet. Almost a test, as if he needed to hear how the truth sounded outside his own mind. She lifted her eyes to him. Do not use that word like it costs you nothing. Pain crossed his face, swift and unguarded. It costs me more than you know. No, she whispered. It cost them. Alexander looked toward the beds. Noah slept curled toward Liam, one hand still clutching the wooden wolf between them, while Liam breathed through parted lips, finally too tired to guard anyone. 5 years of hunger, hiding, fever, small boots patched 3 times, birthdays celebrated with honey crumbs because cake was too expensive. 5 years of Evelyn rubbing Silverleaf under their collars and telling them the world was not safe without explaining that half the danger came from the blood they inherited from him. Alexander had not lived those years. He could grieve them now, but he had not carried them. That was the wound Evelyn could not hand him, because if he truly understood it, she did not know whether it would heal either of them or destroy what little restraint remained. Come with me, he said. Evelyn's arms folded at once. No, 3 steps down the hall. The door stays open. Captain Hale remains outside. You will still see them from where we stand. She followed his gaze to the sitting room attached to the nursery, separated only by a wide arch and a half-open door. The boys would remain in sight. That was the only reason she moved. She took the cedar box from her healer's bag before joining him, because some truths were safer held in the hand than left waiting beneath cloth. Alexander noticed the box immediately. His gaze fixed on it with a terrible stillness. In the sitting room, the air was cooler, scented with old books and unused furniture. Evelyn placed the box on a small table but did not open it. Alexander stood across from her, close enough that she could see the tired shadows beneath his eyes. In the hall, Captain Hale waited with 2 guards, their presence visible through the open door. It was protection. It was also a reminder. Evelyn was still inside a palace that had learned how to make cages look like velvet. I wrote to you, she said. Alexander did not blink. When? After they banished me. 3 times. The first crack appeared in his composure. I received no letters. Evelyn's hand rested on the lid of the box. I used to tell myself that. It is the truth. Maybe. His eyes sharpened. You think I read them and chose not to answer. I think 5 years is long enough for a woman to stop building her life around what a man might have done. The words hit him. He looked away first, toward the nursery where Noah shifted in sleep. When he spoke again, the king had returned, not to silence the man, but to keep him from breaking openly. Who carried them? The first went through the northern post road. The second through a retired palace groom named Ezra Bell. The third through a midwife who knew one of your chapel attendants. Alexander turned back slowly. Ezra Bell died 4 years ago. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the box. I know. The chapel attendant? Disappeared before spring. A darker understanding moved between them. Not proof. Not yet. But the shape of one. Alexander stepped closer to the table. Show me. Evelyn opened the box and removed the copies, carefully unfolded, preserved because hope had died slowly and she had not known what else to do with its body. She did not give them to him at first. Her thumb pressed over the final letter, the one written after the boys were born. These are copies. I kept them because some foolish part of me thought one day I might need to prove I had tried. To me? To myself. His face changed again, and for once Evelyn did not want to know what emotion caused it. She handed him the first page. Alexander took it as if the paper might cut him. His eyes moved over the faded words. Evelyn watched him read the sentence she had written with shaking hands in a rented room that smelled of damp wool and smoke. I do not ask you to believe me for my sake, but for the life I carry. He stopped there. The room seemed to narrow around the silence. His hand lowered slightly. You were pregnant when they banished you. It was not a question. Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. I had not seen a healer yet. I only knew because my body knew before I did. Alexander closed his eyes. For 1 second, the power around him slipped its leash. The lamps flickered. The fire bent low. Captain Hale took one step into view, then stopped when Alexander lifted a hand without looking. No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. When Alexander opened his eyes, they were not angry at Evelyn. That frightened her almost more. His anger needed somewhere to go. Why did you not tell me in the hall? Serena stood close enough to hear me breathe. His gaze snapped to hers. Serena knew? Evelyn remembered white rose perfume, the brush of silk, the smile that looked like sympathy from a distance. She knew enough. She warned me that royal blood inside an accused Omega would not be treated like a child. It would be treated like evidence. And you believed her. I believed the court that had already decided I was guilty. He flinched, and this time Evelyn was glad. Not because she wanted him hurt, but because some truths should not arrive gently. He read the second letter. The one where she had written that she thought there were 2 babies, that one kicked when thunder rolled, and the other went still whenever she cried. His thumb paused over a water stain on the page. He must have known it was not rain. Evelyn saw the knowledge settle on him, heavy and permanent. He read the third last. The final letter. The plea. The newborn names. Noah and Liam. She watched his mouth shape them without sound. There were men who shouted when grief found them. Alexander Blackthorne went silent, and the silence was worse. It seemed to pull all warmth from the walls. When he looked toward the nursery again, the boys were still asleep, unaware that their father had just met them for the first time through paper older than their memories. I never received them, he said. Evelyn believed him then. Not because she wanted to. Because the devastation in his voice was too quiet to be performed. But belief did not erase 5 years. It did not return first steps, first words, first fevers, first questions. It only moved the blade from one place in her chest to another. Then someone made sure you did not. Alexander folded the letters with care so exact it looked painful. Serena. Evelyn did not answer. She did not need to. Marcus, he added. That name made the air colder. Outside the open door. Captain Hale's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He knew what it meant to suspect Lord Marcus Vale. Everyone did. Marcus had not seized power by being loud. He had done it by standing near every king for 30 years and teaching the court to mistake his convenience for wisdom. Alexander turned toward Hale. Find Ezra Bell's service records. The chapel attendant's name. Every transfer, dismissal, illness, payment, and burial tied to them. Quietly. Hale bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. And bring me the Royal Archive ledger from the year Evelyn Harper was banished. Evelyn's head lifted. The ledger will have been cleaned. Alexander's mouth hardened. Then we will look for the places that are too clean. For a dangerous moment, hope brushed against Evelyn. She crushed it quickly. Hope had poor timing and worse survival instincts. You cannot investigate Serena openly tonight, she said. She will know. She already knows enough to be afraid. In another wing of the palace, Serena Vale stood before a mirror while 2 maids unpinned the half-finished coronation veil from her hair. Her reflection was flawless, which was fortunate, because everything beneath it was beginning to crack. She had watched Alexander follow Evelyn to the family wing. She had watched him stop the ceremony for 2 strange boys with blackthorn eyes. She had watched Sacred Water answer an Omega who should have been nothing but an old scandal. Now a maid's hands trembled at the wrong pin, and Serena caught her wrist with perfect calm. "Leave." The maid curtsied and fled. Lord Marcus entered before the door had fully closed, his face severe. "You lost control of the room." Serena turned. The room should not have had two royal-looking children standing in it. "Do not say royal. Do not speak to me as if I am stupid." Marcus's eyes flashed. "Then do not behave as if panic is strategy." Serena crossed to the vanity and picked up a perfume bottle, then set it down without using it. White rose would not help tonight. The children had smelled the letters. That was impossible. They had been infants when the last one arrived, if arrived was the word for something dragged from a frightened midwife and burned beneath Serena's own hand. "They should have died in the border cold," she said softly, not with sorrow, but with disbelief. Marcus's expression did not change. "Careful. No one is here. Walls have ruined wiser people than you." Serena laughed once, humorless. The younger one looked at me as if he knew. "Children know nothing. Blood remembers." "That is different." The answer chilled her. "Then what do we do?" Marcus moved to the window and looked down over the rain-dark courtyard. "We return the question to guilt. If the boys are his, Evelyn hid royal heirs for 5 years. That is treason by another name. If she claims she hid them out of fear, we ask fear of whom? She has no proof." Serena's eyes narrowed. "The letters. Burned. Copies?" Marcus turned. For the first time, something like concern moved through his face. "Find out." Back in the winter nursery, Evelyn felt a sudden sting beneath her collarbone, where the old mate mark had once glowed before the court stripped it from record, if not from flesh. She pressed a hand to it. Alexander noticed. Of course he noticed everything now, when noticing came 5 years too late. "What is wrong?" "Nothing." "Evelyn." "I said nothing." But the sting sharpened, and from the nursery, Noah whimpered. Evelyn rushed to him. Alexander followed, stopping at the edge of the rug as if afraid to enter too quickly. Noah's cheeks were flushed. Liam had turned in his sleep toward his brother, their wrists nearly touching beneath the blankets. The faint marks under their skin glowed in rhythm, not bright, but steady. Evelyn placed a hand on Noah's forehead. "Too warm. The silver leaf is wearing off," she murmured. "It always gives them a fever when it breaks too fast." Alexander's face went pale beneath the firelight. "Silverleaf." To hide their scent. The room held that confession like a breath. Alexander looked at the boys, then at her. "For 5 years. Every morning. It hurt them. It protected them." "That is not what I asked." Evelyn's control snapped, softly but completely. "No, it did not hurt them more than being found would have." Noah stirred. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused and gold. At the edges. "Mama?" Evelyn sat beside him, all anger gone from her voice. "I am here. Too hot." "I know, sweetheart." She reached for her bag, but Alexander was already there, lifting it and placing it beside her without a word. She mixed a cooling salve with practiced hands. Liam woke as she worked, blinking sleepily at Alexander, then at his mother. "Is he still here?" "Yes," Evelyn said. Liam considered this with grave suspicion. "Why?" Alexander answered before she could. "Because I am trying to understand." Liam frowned. "You should have done that before." The words were simple. Childish. Devastating. Evelyn closed her eyes. Alexander accepted them as if they were law. "Yes," he said. "I should have." Noah reached out suddenly, not for Evelyn, but toward Alexander's sleeve. He stopped short of touching him, fingers hovering in the air. "You smell like the stones," he whispered. Alexander crouched slowly, making himself smaller in a way kings rarely did. "And you smell like winter rain." Noah's brow furrowed. "Mama says we smell like smoke." Your mother was hiding the rest. Liam sat up, offended. "We were not hiding. We were being safe." Alexander looked at Evelyn over the boys' heads. "Yes," he said quietly. "You were." For the first time, Evelyn did not know what to do with his agreement. The boys' marks dimmed after the salve cooled their skin, but the room did not return to what it had been. Too much had surfaced. Not enough to prove everything. Enough to make denial impossible. Enough for Alexander to begin doubting the court, for Evelyn to fear believing him, and for Serena Vale to understand that the crown she had almost touched now stood on the edge of slipping from her hands. Captain Hale returned near midnight with rain on his cloak and tension in his eyes. He did not enter until Alexander nodded. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "the archive ledger from that year is missing 6 pages." Alexander rose. Evelyn felt the air tighten. "Which 6? Hale glanced at her, then back at the king. "The week of Miss Harper's banishment, the 3 courier entries afterward, and the record of all private correspondence delivered to your chambers that winter." A chill moved through Evelyn despite the fire. Alexander's face became unreadable. "Who signed the removal?" Hale swallowed. "Lord Marcus Vale." From the hallway beyond him came the faintest sound. A shift of fabric. A footstep retreating too quickly. Evelyn turned toward the open door. No one stood there now, but the lamp flame nearest the corridor trembled, and in the air lingered a trace of white rose perfume. White rose perfume lingered in the corridor long after the footsteps vanished, and Evelyn knew at once that the night had changed again. Secrets were no longer rising by accident. They were being hunted. Captain Hale reached for the door, but Alexander stopped him with a look, sharp and silent. The hallway beyond the nursery was empty, washed in blue lamp glow and rain shadow, yet the trace of Serena's scent clung to the air like a smile left behind on purpose. Evelyn gathered the letters from the sitting room table with hands that wanted to shake and refused to. Noah and Liam were awake now, both sitting up beneath their blankets, their faces pale in the firelight. Children could sleep through storms, hunger, and long roads, but not through the moment a room became afraid. "Mama?" Noah whispered. Evelyn crossed to him and tucked the cedar box into her healer's bag. "Everything is fine." Liam narrowed his eyes. "That is the voice you use when everything is not fine." Alexander looked at the boy, and something like sorrow moved across his face. "He knows you well." Evelyn did not answer. She did not have room for tenderness, while danger was choosing its next shape. Captain Hale stepped closer to Alexander and lowered his voice, though not enough to keep Evelyn from hearing. "Your Majesty, if Lady Serena heard the discussion of the ledger, Lord Marcus will move before morning." "He already has," Evelyn said. The men turned to her. She kept one hand on Noah's shoulder, the other on Liam's blanket. "Marcus does not wait until a threat becomes public. He makes the court afraid of it first." Alexander's eyes sharpened. "What would he use?" Evelyn almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the answer was written in every year she had survived. "Me. Always me." She was right. The summons came less than an hour later, carried not by a guard, but by the royal priest himself, his face grave, his silver robes hastily belted, as though he had been pulled from prayer. Captain Hale tried to block the doorway, but the priest lifted a trembling hand. By emergency petition of the High Council, witnessed by Lord Marcus Vale and Lady Serena Vale, Evelyn Harper is required to appear before the dawn session. Alexander stepped forward. "There is no dawn session." "There is now, Your Majesty." The priest swallowed. "The petition invokes the Air Preservation Statute." Evelyn felt the words strike her body before her mind could gather them. Air preservation. An old law. An ugly law. Written in an age when royal blood mattered more than the mothers who carried it. Alexander went dangerously still. That statute has not been invoked in over 80 years. It has not been repealed. The priest looked miserable. If there is credible suspicion that children of royal blood have been concealed, endangered, or exposed to scent-altering substances, the High Council may order protective custody until their lineage and fitness of guardianship are determined. Evelyn's hand tightened on Liam's blanket. Liam looked from her to Alexander. "What does that mean?" No one answered fast enough. Noah did. His voice was very small. "They want to take us." Evelyn turned at once. "No one is taking you." But the words sounded like a promise standing at the edge of a cliff. Alexander faced the priest. "Denied. Your Majesty, the council argues that your personal involvement creates conflict." Lord Marcus appeared behind the priest as if conjured by the law itself, dressed in dark formal robes, every white hair in place, every line of his face arranged into solemn duty. Serena stood beside him, no coronation veil now, no soft smile, only silver silk and wounded righteousness. "No one wishes to distress the children," Marcus said. "That is precisely why they must be protected from further instability." Evelyn rose slowly. "Do not dress theft in gentle words." Serena's eyes flicked to the boys. "Theft? You hid possible royal heirs in poverty for 5 years, fed them masking herbs strong enough to cause fever, and brought them into court under false names. If Alexander had done any of that, every noble in this palace would call it abuse of power. But because you are their mother, you expect sentiment to excuse recklessness." The blow landed because it was aimed well. Evelyn knew hunger. She knew silverleaf fever. She knew patched boots, cold rooms, and Liam asking why being himself meant hiding. Serena had found the one place Evelyn's armor had always been thin, the fear that love had not been enough to make her choices good. Alexander's voice cut in, low and cold. "You will not speak to her that way." Serena turned to him with perfect hurt. "I am speaking for the children. Someone has to. Their mother has spoken for them every day of their lives. And yet they stand here undocumented, unverified, and sick from illegal sense suppression." Evelyn flinched. She hated herself for it, but Serena saw. Of course she saw. Marcus stepped forward, calm as winter. "The law does not accuse Miss Harper of malice. It simply recognizes that royal children belong not only to a household, but to the realm." Evelyn felt the room tilt. There it was. The truth beneath every polished phrase. Not sons. Not children. Royal assets. Bloodline. Future. Claim. Her nightmares had always known the court would say it eventually. Liam threw back his blanket and climbed from the bed. "We belong to Mama." Marcus gave him a patient smile. "You are too young to understand." "I understand you are mean." "Liam," Evelyn whispered, but her voice broke on his name. Noah got out of bed too and stood beside his brother, still fever-flushed, still barefoot, still trying to be brave when his hands trembled. "We are not going anywhere without her." Serena's expression softened in a way that made Evelyn's skin crawl. "Poor things. Of course you are frightened. That is what happens when children are taught that everyone outside their mother is a threat." Evelyn took one step forward. Captain Hale shifted, not to stop her, but as if ready to stand with her. Alexander noticed. Marcus noticed too. The room had lines now. Invisible but forming fast. "The court will hear this at dawn," Marcus said. "Until then, the children will be transferred to a neutral royal chamber under healer supervision." "No," Evelyn said. "Miss Harper, refusal will weigh heavily against your claim of guardianship." "They are not a claim. They are my sons." Marcus sighed, as if disappointed by emotion. "And if they are also the king's sons, then the king owes them protection from all risk, including you." Alexander moved so fast the candles bent toward him, yet he did not touch Marcus. He stopped inches away, towering, quiet, his wolf pressing against the air until every guard in the corridor lowered his eyes. "Choose your next words carefully." Marcus bowed his head just enough to avoid open defiance. "I choose the law, Your Majesty. As you taught us all to do 5 years ago." Silence crashed through the room. Evelyn saw the words hit Alexander. Saw the old court, the old trial, the old impossible choice rise behind his eyes. Marcus had not only attacked her. He had trapped Alexander inside his own worst failure. If Alexander rejected the law now, the council would say he changed justice only when his blood was threatened. If he obeyed it, Evelyn would lose the boys before sunrise. Serena stepped in with a softer knife. "No one wants to separate a mother from her children forever. Cooperate, Evelyn. Let the healers examine them. Let the court confirm what is best. Unless there is something else you are hiding." Evelyn's throat tightened. There was always something else. The remaining silver leaf in her bag. The incomplete royal marks. The fact that the boys had begun hearing the palace stones. The truth that Liam's dreams sometimes carried memories he had never lived. Not shameful things. Not wrong things. But things the court would twist, because courts did not need monsters. They could make monsters from frightened children if the law gave them a clean enough mirror. Noah reached for her hand. She took it at once. "I will go to the dawn session," she said. "The boys stay here until then." Marcus shook his head. "Impossible." Alexander spoke. "They stay." Marcus looked almost regretful. "Then I must inform you the High Council has already voted emergency transfer by majority seal." Captain Hale stiffened. "Without the king?" "The statute allows it when the king is deemed personally compromised." Serena's eyes glistened, a performance for every witness at the doorway. "Alexander, please. Do not make this harder for them. If they are yours, you will have every right once the bloodline is confirmed. But tonight, until the court understands what she has done to them, you cannot simply place desire above duty." Desire. Evelyn hated the word in Serena's mouth. It made something sacred sound selfish. Alexander looked back at Evelyn, and she saw the battle inside him, clearer than she had seen it 5 years ago, because this time she knew exactly what was being stolen. "Do not," she whispered. It was not a plea. It was a warning from the last unbroken place in her. "Do not let them use your crown to take my children." His face went pale. "I will not." But then the second wave arrived. 6 council guards in gray cloaks, not palace guards under Alexander's direct command, but lawkeepers bound to the old statutes. Their captain held a sealed order in both hands. Behind them came 2 royal healers carrying white satchels and looking anywhere except Evelyn's face. Liam stepped in front of Noah. Noah stepped in front of Evelyn. The sight nearly shattered her. Children should not have to make walls of themselves. Alexander turned to Captain Hale. "No one crosses this threshold." Hale drew himself straight. "Yes, Your Majesty." Marcus lifted the sealed order. "Obstructing lawful heir preservation will force the council to question every person in this room." His gaze slid to Hale. "Including guards who choose loyalty over law." Hale did not move, but Evelyn saw the cost of it. Saw the way the younger guards behind him hesitated. Marcus was not trying to overpower Alexander. He was making everyone around him afraid of obeying. Serena looked at Evelyn then, and in her eyes was the same bright triumph from 5 years ago. Not loud, not careless. Certain. Evelyn understood. This was how Serena had won before. Not by dragging Evelyn down with her own hands, but by making every person with power afraid to reach for her. The healers stepped forward. Evelyn pulled the boys behind her. "Stay back." The older healer's voice trembled. "Miss Harper, please. We only need to take their temperature, examine the marks, and administer a mild calming draft for transport. No drafts. It is standard for distressed pups. They are not distressed because they are wild. They are distressed because strangers are discussing them like property." Alexander moved to stand beside Evelyn. Not in front of her. Beside her. The difference struck the room hard enough that even Marcus paused. "The children stay with their mother," Alexander said. "Any examination happens here, with her consent and with me present." Marcus's mouth tightened. "That is not neutral." "No," Alexander said. "It is just." For one breath, Evelyn thought it might hold. Then Serena turned her face toward the corridor and let a tear fall with perfect timing. "The king is bewitched." The words were barely above a whisper, yet everyone heard them. The basin answered her. The stones answered the children. He was calm until they arrived, and now he defies council law for a woman once convicted of treason. The accusation bloomed through the guards like smoke. Bewitched. Old fear. Easy fear. The kind of fear that made reason useless. One council guard touched the charm at his throat. Another glanced at Evelyn as if her tired dress had become a cloak of spells. Evelyn wanted to scream. Instead, she stood very still. If she became angry, Serena would call it proof. If she cried, Marcus would call it instability. If she begged, the law would call it admission. Alexander's eyes flashed gold. Enough. But enough came too late. The council captain stepped forward, voice strained but formal. "By emergency authority, we must remove the minors to neutral custody until dawn." Liam made a small sound, not fear exactly, but betrayal. He had looked at Alexander for an answer. For protection. For the bravery he thought fathers should have. Evelyn saw Alexander see it. Saw the wound open. Saw the king prepare to break law in front of every witness if that was what it took. And she knew Marcus was waiting for exactly that. If Alexander used force, the council would call him compromised. Serena would call Evelyn dangerous. The boys would become the center of a succession crisis before anyone proved the first lie. Evelyn did the hardest thing she had done since walking out of Blackthorn Court 5 years earlier. She let go of Alexander's protection and stepped forward alone. I will come with them. Marcus blinked. Serena's smile twitched. Alexander turned sharply. Evelyn. No, her voice shook, but it did not break. If the law says neutral custody, then I enter custody too. The council captain frowned. That is not provided for. Then provide for it. They are 5 years old. One still has a fever. The other will bite the first stranger who reaches for his brother, and do not pretend any of you would handle that kindly. I am their mother, their healer, and the only person in this palace they fully trust. Remove me from them, and you create the distress you claim to prevent. The room held still. Even Marcus could not immediately argue without sounding cruel. Serena recovered. How noble. But a mother under investigation cannot supervise the evidence. Evidence. Liam heard it. Something in his face changed. Not anger this time. Hurt. Deep, bewildered hurt. Noah whispered, "We are not evidence." Evelyn turned back too late. Liam's eyes had gone gold, not bright with threat, but shining with tears he refused to let fall. The faint mark on his wrist flared beneath his sleeve. Noah's answered. The nursery windows rattled though the rain outside had softened. Alexander stepped toward them, but Liam stepped back. Not from fear of Alexander. From fear of all of them. I want to go home, he said. Evelyn crossed the room and knelt before him, gathering both boys into her arms as the court's old law waited at the door. I know. You promised. I know. You said no one would take us. Evelyn held him tighter, and this time she could not stop the tears. I am trying. Those 3 words stripped the room bare. Not queenly. Not powerful. Not enough to satisfy law. Only a mother at the edge of losing the children she had hidden from wolves, hunger, winter, and the truth itself. Alexander looked at her, and the last of his restraint seemed to turn to ash. But before he could speak, a soft voice came from the hallway. Perhaps the boys should answer for themselves. Everyone turned. The old healer from the lower infirmary stood beyond the council guards, bent with age, wrapped in a plain brown shawl, her silver hair damp from the rain. Evelyn knew her at once, though 5 years had weathered her face. Miriam Vale. No relation to Serena, despite the name. The woman who had once taught Evelyn how to set bones, mix fever salve, and identify forged medical seals. The woman Evelyn had believed dead. Serena went white. Marcus did not move, but his eyes sharpened into warning. Miriam looked past them all, directly at Alexander. Her voice trembled, but it carried. Your Majesty, before anyone removes those children, you should know what was hidden under Lady Serena's floor. Serena recovered with a laugh too quick to be real. This woman is confused. Miriam lifted a small metal box, blackened at the edges. No, my lady. I was confused 5 years ago when I was paid to disappear. Tonight, I am very clear. Evelyn rose slowly, her arms still around Noah and Liam. Alexander stared at the box. Serena took 1 step back. Marcus said, "Seize her." But no one moved. Because from inside the blackened box came the scent of burned paper, old blood, white rose perfume, and a truth that had survived fire. For one suspended moment, no one in the winter nursery moved toward Miriam Vale, because the blackened metal box in her hands had done what no command could do. It had made the law hesitate. The council guards stood frozen between duty and fear, their gray cloaks still damp from the rain. The royal priest stared at the box as if it were a relic pulled from a grave. Serena's face had gone so pale beneath her perfect powder that the candlelight seemed too warm for her skin. Lord Marcus recovered first, because men like him survived by speaking before truth found its voice. This is outrageous, he said, each word smooth and measured. A dismissed healer appears at midnight carrying some burned scrap, and we are expected to halt lawful Proceedings? Miriam did not look at him. She looked only at Alexander. Your Majesty, I was not dismissed. I was paid to leave the realm after the trial. The order bore Lord Marcus Vale's private seal. Marcus gave a thin, pitying smile. An old woman's memory is not evidence. No, Miriam said, lifting the box higher. But evidence is. Serena stepped forward so quickly the council captain shifted in front of her by instinct. That box belongs to me. The words left her mouth before she could soften them. The room heard it. Everyone heard it. Evelyn felt Noah's hand tighten around her skirt. Liam went very still in her arms. Alexander's gaze moved slowly from the box to Serena. Does it? Serena's lips parted. For the first time since Evelyn had known her, no perfect answer arrived. Lord Marcus intervened. My daughter means that stolen items from her chamber are private property. Surely even under unusual circumstances, the court has not abandoned all standards. Alexander turned toward Captain Hale. Bring everyone to the Great Hall. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Your Majesty, this matter can be handled privately. No, the word was quiet, but final enough to close every path around it. 5 years ago, Evelyn Harper was accused before the court. Tonight, the truth will be heard before the court. Evelyn's heart climbed into her throat. Public. Again. The same hall. The same eyes. The same old shame waiting to see whether it could still find her spine. Alexander looked at her then, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. Only if you choose it, he said. The choice nearly undid her. Not the offer, but the lateness of it. 5 years ago, no one had asked what she chose. The court had chosen guilt. Serena had chosen silence. Marcus had chosen exile. Alexander had chosen the crown's safety over the woman standing alone beneath it. Now the doors stood open and the whole palace waited, but for the first time, Evelyn's will had weight in the room. She looked down at Noah and Liam. Noah's fever had eased, though his cheeks were still flushed. Liam's eyes were fierce and wet, fixed on Miriam's box as if he understood that inside it lay some missing piece of why his mother had cried in the dark. Evelyn wanted to spare them. She wanted to hide them in the nursery, feed them honey cakes, tell them the world would be kinder by morning. But kindness without truth was only another curtain. We go together, she said. Alexander bowed his head once. Together. No one spoke as they walked back through the family wing. This time, Evelyn was not marched like a disgraced woman. She walked with one son holding each hand, Miriam behind her carrying the box, Captain Hale and the palace guards surrounding them not as captors, but as a wall. Alexander walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, close enough for the court to see the choice he was making with every step. By the time they reached the Great Hall, the nobles had been gathered again, pulled from guest chambers, music rooms, and interrupted celebrations. The silver crown still rested on its velvet cushion beside the moonstone basin. Serena's unfinished coronation flowers drooped around the platform. Rain tapped against the tall windows, steady and soft, as if the storm itself had settled in to listen. Murmurs rose when Evelyn entered. They changed when the court saw Alexander beside her. They changed again when Noah and Liam stepped beneath the blackthorn banners and the silver branches carved into the hall doors gave off a faint glow. The royal priest made the sign of the moon over his heart. Serena stood at the base of the platform with Lord Marcus, her beauty sharpened by fear. Marcus still looked composed, but Evelyn saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he measured exits, allies, damage. Alexander ascended only the first step of the dais, then stopped. He did not sit on the throne. He turned to face the court from the floor, on the same level as Evelyn. That was when the murmurs began to die. 5 years ago, Alexander said, his voice carrying without strain, this court condemned Evelyn Harper for treason against Blackthorn Realm. Evidence was presented. Witnesses spoke. I accepted the judgment placed before me. His gaze moved across the nobles, cold enough to make several lower their eyes. Tonight, that judgment is reopened. Serena's chin lifted. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. So was removing 6 pages from the royal archive. The hall went silent. Marcus's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to tighten. Alexander held out his hand. Captain Hale stepped forward with the ledger, its old leather cover dark with age. The records for the week of Evelyn Harper's banishment are missing. The courier entries afterward are missing. The private correspondence records for my chambers that winter are missing. The removal was signed by Lord Marcus Vale. A sharp rustle moved through the court. Marcus bowed his head with solemn patience. Administrative preservation often requires relocation of sensitive pages. I acted within my authority as senior counsel advisor. Then you will tell the court where those pages are. In the sealed council archive, I imagine. You imagine? Alexander's voice cooled further. For a man who recalls law so precisely, your memory fails in convenient places. A few nobles shifted. It was small, but Evelyn felt the court begin to tilt. Not toward her. Not yet. Away from certainty. That was how truth entered rooms like this, not as a roar, but as a crack in the floor. Alexander nodded to Miriam. Speak. Miriam stepped into the center of the hall. She seemed smaller beneath the high ceiling, but her hands were steady now. I served the lower infirmary for 26 years. Evelyn Harper was my apprentice. She did not have access to Western defense maps. She did not handle military sedatives. On the morning of the accusation, I found a forged infirmary seal in the supply cabinet. Before I could report it, Lord Marcus Vale summoned me. Marcus's mouth tightened. Careful, healer. Miriam finally looked at him. I was careful for 5 years. It made me ashamed. She opened the blackened box. The smell reached Evelyn before the contents were visible. Burned paper, old ink, faint iron, and Serena's white rose perfume threaded through it like a signature she had never known she left behind. Miriam removed 3 folded fragments wrapped in linen. These were taken from beneath Lady Serena's chamber floor tonight. I hid nearby after I heard the children had come to court. I knew if they were Evelyn's, the letters might still matter. Serena laughed, high and brittle. Absurd. Anyone could place burned paper in a box. Yes, Miriam said. But not everyone would have kept the original wax seals. She placed 3 small pieces of wax on the moonstone basin's rim. They were damaged by heat, but the markings remained, not the blackthorn crust. Not Evelyn's. Serena Vale's personal flower seal, pressed over the broken edges where another seal had once been opened. The royal priest leaned close, then went pale. These were resealed after opening. Alexander's eyes went to Serena. She did not look at him. Evelyn felt her own knees weaken, but Noah and Liam held tighter to her hands, and somehow that kept her standing. Miriam unfolded the first fragment. The first letter says, Alexander, I was framed. I do not ask you to believe me for my sake, but for the life I carry. The room did not breathe. A noblewoman near the front pressed a hand to her mouth. The priest whispered a prayer. Alexander's face emptied of every public expression until only the wound remained. Miriam unfolded the second. The second says, I think there are 2. One moves when thunder rolls. One goes still when I cry. I tell them you are not cruel. Please do not make me a liar. A sound moved through the hall then, not gossip, not outrage, but something softer and more devastating. Recognition. Evelyn kept her eyes on the floor because if she looked at Alexander, she might remember the woman who had written those words and still believed they could reach him. Miriam's voice trembled over the third. The last letter says, they are here. They lived. If you ever loved me, protect them. Liam looked up at Evelyn. That was us. Evelyn bent and kissed his hair. Yes. Noah's eyes filled with tears. You asked him to come? I did. Noah looked across the hall at Alexander, not with accusation exactly, but with the terrible clarity of a child piecing together a hurt too large for him. Alexander accepted that gaze without defense. Then Serena spoke, because silence had become too dangerous for her. Even if the letters are real, they prove she hid the children. They prove she chose exile over lawful return. They prove she kept potential heirs from their father and king. Marcus seized the argument at once. Precisely. Emotional evidence does not erase legal misconduct. If anything, it confirms concealment. The heir preservation statute must stand until the boys are examined and Miss Harper's guardianship is judged. The court stirred again, pulled back toward law because law felt safer than grief. Evelyn saw it happening and felt the old helplessness rise. Serena did not need innocence. She only needed doubt. Marcus did not need love. He had language. Alexander descended the single step and crossed to Evelyn. He stopped close enough that she could see the shattered restraint in his eyes, but when he spoke, it was to the court. No, Marcus's brows lifted. Your Majesty? You will not use a law meant to protect children as a leash around their mother's throat. The statute is clear. Then hear your king make it clearer. Evelyn Harper hid these children because this court made itself unsafe. She ran because the same hands now demanding custody first manufactured her exile, intercepted her pleas, and buried the record. She used Silverleaf because our laws left royal children less safe than secrecy. If blame is owed, it begins with the throne that failed to question the evidence, and the advisors who profited from my failure. Marcus's face hardened. You risk undermining the crown for one woman. Alexander's voice dropped. No, I am restoring it for 2 children. Then he knelt. Not to the court. Not to the crown. Before Noah and Liam. The hall forgot how to breathe. Kings bowed to no one but the dead and the gods, and Alexander Blackthorne knelt on the moonstone floor before 2 barefoot boys in travel-worn clothes. Liam leaned back against Evelyn, uncertain. Noah stared. Alexander did not reach for them. He did not claim touch he had not earned. Noah Harper, he said, and Evelyn's heart twisted because he used her name for them first. Liam Harper. I did not know you existed. That does not excuse the years I missed. It only means the first true thing I can give you is this: no one in this court will take you from your mother. Not by law. Not by fear. Not by my name. Liam's lower lip trembled. Are you our father? Alexander closed his eyes for one beat, as if the word pierced him clean through. Yes. Then why did you not find us? There it was. No courtly language. No statute. No place to hide. Alexander opened his eyes. Because I believed people I should have questioned, and I failed the woman who was protecting you. I will spend the rest of my life answering that, but tonight, I will start by standing where I should have stood 5 years ago. He rose and turned toward the moonstone basin. Priest. The royal priest approached, shaken. Your Majesty? The bloodline right. Without harm. Without force. Serena stepped forward. Alexander, no. He looked at her then, truly looked, and whatever mercy she had hoped to find was not there. You will address me as your Majesty. The correction cut more deeply than anger. Serena stopped. The priest placed both hands over the basin and whispered the old words. No blade touched skin. No child was hurt. The right did not need pain. It needed presence, name, and truth. Evelyn placed one hand over Noah's heart, one over Liam's, and Alexander stood opposite them, his palm hovering above the water. If they are not of my line, he said, let the water remain still. The court leaned forward. Serena clasped her hands so tightly her knuckles blanched. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Noah looked at Evelyn. She nodded. Liam whispered, do we have to do anything? No, Evelyn said softly. Just be. The moonstone basin brightened. At first, it was only a shimmer, like dawn beneath ice. Then silver light rose from the water and curled through the air, touching Noah's wrist, then Liam's, then Alexander's open palm. The marks beneath the boy's skin bloomed, not harshly, not frighteningly, but like stars coming awake. Above the basin, the light formed the blackthorn crest, a wolf beneath a crescent crown, split into 2 smaller flames and joined again at the center. The court froze. Even Marcus could not speak. The priest sank to one knee. Royal heirs, he whispered. Twin heirs of the Blackthorn bloodline. The words moved through the hall like thunder made of breath. Some nobles knelt at once. Others followed because truth, once witnessed by old magic, left no room for pride. Serena stumbled back, shaking her head. No. She tricked it. She must have tricked it. Miriam lifted the final piece from the box. There is one more thing. Marcus moved suddenly. Enough. Alexander's voice stopped him. Let her speak. Miriam held up a small ledger strip, half burned at the edge. A payment record. Signed by Lord Marcus. Delivered to the midwife who carried Evelyn's third letter. The note beside it says, silence the birth record, destroy correspondence, confirm no surviving issue. The hall erupted. Not in violence, but in shock so deep that people stood from their seats, voices rising, questions breaking over one another. Serena turned to Marcus, panic raw now. You said there was no record. Marcus's face went white with fury. In saving herself, Serena had answered too much. Alexander heard it. Everyone did. The court that once condemned Evelyn now stared at the false Luna as if seeing her for the first time without candlelight. Serena looked around, searching for sympathy, but sympathy had fled the moment the basin revealed the heirs. She was an Omega, Serena said, desperation stripping the sweetness from her voice. You would have let her be queen. Her. A border healer. A traitor's daughter. I did what the realm needed. Evelyn felt the last chain inside her break. She stepped forward, still holding the boy's hands. No. You did what envy needed and called it duty. Serena's face twisted. You should have stayed gone. Alexander turned to Captain Hale. Lady Serena Vale and Lord Marcus Vale are to be held under royal guard pending formal trial for conspiracy against the crown, obstruction of royal correspondence, falsification of evidence, and endangerment of royal heirs. Marcus drew himself up. You cannot do this before council review. I am the council review. Captain Hale bowed, and this time the guards moved without hesitation. Serena looked to Alexander, but he had already turned away from her. That, more than the order, seemed to unmake her. Not punishment. Irrelevance. When the doors closed behind Serena and Marcus, the great hall remained silent, full of people who had spent 5 years believing a lie because the lie had been convenient. Alexander faced them all. 5 years ago, this court demanded I choose between crown and mate. I chose fear and called it duty. Tonight, before every noble house, every council seal, and every witness gathered under Blackthorn law, I correct that failure. He turned to Evelyn. The silence deepened. She felt hundreds of eyes on her patched dress, her healer's hands, her tired face, her sons standing at her sides. But this time, their eyes did not make her smaller. Alexander lowered himself to one knee before her. A sound passed through the hall, soft and stunned. Evelyn forgot to breathe. Evelyn Harper, he said, his voice steady though his eyes were not. You owe me nothing. Not forgiveness. Not trust. Not the years I lost by failing you. But I owe you truth before the same court that shamed you. You were my mate before they called you traitor. You were the mother of my sons before I knew they lived. You were innocent before this realm deserved your return. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision, but she did not let them fall yet. Not for the court. Not for him. Not until she chose them. Alexander bowed his head. If you permit it, I claim responsibility before crown and kingdom. I claim Noah and Liam as my heirs. I claim my failure as mine alone. And I claim you not as property, not as debt, not as a crown I can place on your head, but as the woman I should have protected when protection had a cost. The court waited for Evelyn to collapse into forgiveness, because courts loved neat endings. Evelyn did not give them one. She looked at the man kneeling before her, then at the boys, then at the nobles who had once watched her exile and now watched her rise. Stand up, Alexander, she said softly. He did. She turned to the court. My sons will be honored. Not used. Not tested without consent. Not taken from me by old laws written by people who feared mothers less than bloodlines. The royal priest bowed. So witnessed. Evelyn looked back at Alexander. And I will not be claimed because guilt brought you to your knees. Something like pain and respect moved through his face. Then why? She took Noah's hand and Liam's hand, standing between the children she had saved and the king who had finally chosen correctly. Because when I choose, it will be mine. Alexander bowed his head before her, not as king to subject, but as a man accepting the first honest law she had ever given him. Around them, one by one, the court knelt. Not to Serena's crown. Not to Marcus's law. To the twin heirs glowing beneath the old banners. To the mother who had carried them through exile. To the truth that had survived fire, silence, and 5 years of being buried beneath a false Luna's floor. By sunrise, the rain had stopped and Blackthorn Palace looked less like a fortress carved from storm clouds and more like a place forced to face what daylight revealed. The Great Hall remained full long after Serena Vale and Lord Marcus were escorted away, because no one seemed willing to be the first to leave the room where 5 years of certainty had fallen apart. Nobles stood in uneasy clusters, whispering into sleeves, glancing toward Evelyn as if trying to reconcile the woman they had condemned with the mother standing beneath the royal banners. One son asleep against her shoulder and the other holding her hand with fierce, exhausted loyalty. Alexander did not let the court recover its arrogance. Before the Moonstone Basin had gone dark, he ordered the old air preservation statute suspended pending permanent repeal. The royal priest recorded Noah and Liam as acknowledged heirs of the Blackthorn line, not by rumor, not by council permission, but by witnessed right, royal declaration, and the unmistakable answer of the old magic itself. Captain Hale was placed in charge of a new inquiry into every forged document, missing ledger page, and silenced witness tied to Evelyn's banishment. Miriam Vale, who had returned with the burned letters, was restored to royal protection and named senior healer of the investigation. As for Serena and Marcus, Alexander did not make a spectacle of punishment. He did something worse for people who had lived on spectacle. He made the law honest in front of everyone. Their titles were suspended, their estates sealed, their council privileges revoked, and their coming trial would not be managed by allies chosen from old families, but by a mixed tribunal of pack elders, royal healers, border witnesses, and court officials who had not served under Marcus. Serena's unfinished crown was removed from the velvet cushion and locked away, not destroyed, because Alexander said the kingdom needed to remember how close it had come to crowning a lie. When the court finally bowed, Evelyn almost did not understand that the gesture was meant for her. She had spent so long being avoided, pitted, or quietly judged that respect felt stranger than cruelty. One by one, nobles lowered their heads. Some out of guilt, some out of fear, a few perhaps out of real shame. Evelyn did not care which. She did not need their hearts to change by morning. She only needed them to learn that her sons were not to be touched, tested, traded, or discussed as if love were less lawful than blood. Noah slept through most of it, his fever finally eased by Miriam's cooling salve, while Liam stayed awake with stubborn determination, watching every adult in the room as if making a private list of who could be trusted. When Alexander approached, Liam stepped closer to Evelyn, but he no longer looked at the king as an enemy. He looked at him as a question. Alexander crouched in front of him, careful and slow. "You protected your mother," he said. Liam frowned. Nobody else was doing it. The words cut softly through the hall. Alexander accepted them without flinching. "You are right." Liam studied him. "Will you do it now?" Alexander looked up at Evelyn before he answered, and the fact that he did not speak for her made something in her chest loosen. "If she allows me to stand near enough," he said. Evelyn did not answer then. She was too tired, and some decisions deserved more than exhaustion. The winter nursery became theirs that afternoon, not as a holding room, but as a beginning. Servants brought warm clothes in the boys' sizes, though Evelyn quietly rejected anything too grand. Noah chose a dark blue sweater because it was soft. Liam chose boots with silver buckles because, in his words, they looked fast. Evelyn was given a suite beside theirs with an adjoining door that remained open because she had asked for open doors, and Alexander had remembered. That mattered more than jewels would have. For the next week, the palace changed around them in small, impossible ways. The family wing, silent for years, filled with children's footsteps. Noah discovered the library and asked the royal tutor Weatherstones could remember names. Liam followed Captain Hale through morning patrol and announced that the guards were turning corners wrong. Miriam laughed for the first time Evelyn could remember and told Alexander that both boys were healthy, underfed perhaps, frightened certainly, but strong in every way that mattered. The silver leaf was stopped gradually, not ripped away, and each day the boys smelled a little more like themselves: rain, pine, winter iron, and the deep blackthorn note that made older guards look away with wet eyes. Alexander did not rush Evelyn. That was perhaps the hardest kindness to distrust. He came to breakfast when invited and stayed away when she needed space. He answered Noah's careful questions and Liam's blunt ones. He listened when Evelyn explained their fevers, their nightmares, the way Noah hated loud doors and Liam could not sleep unless he knew where every exit was. Each answer seemed to add another stone to the guilt he carried, but he never handed that weight to her and called it apology. He simply learned. On the 7th evening, Evelyn found him in the winter garden, the same place where he had once promised to name her before the kingdom. Snow had begun to fall beyond the glass roof, soft as breath. Alexander stood beside the frozen roses, not turning until she spoke. "You used to come here when the court was too loud." His eyes softened with memory. "You remembered." "I remembered too much." "So did I. But not enough of what mattered." She walked to the stone bench, but did not sit. "I am staying." Hope moved across his face before he could hide it. Evelyn lifted a hand. "For Noah and Liam. They deserve to know their father. They deserve their name, their home, their history. And I will serve as royal healer until the border clinics are rebuilt with proper funding." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You are already negotiating policy. I learned from raising children with no money. Everything is policy when there is not enough bread." The smile faded into something deeper. "And us?" There it was, asked gently, without demand. Evelyn looked through the glass at the snow falling over the palace that had once erased her and now waited for her answer. "I loved you once in a way that made me foolish. I loved you in a way that was not brave enough." She looked back at him then. "I do not want the old love back. It trusted too easily." Alexander nodded, pain and acceptance in the movement. "Then let me earn something new." Evelyn was silent for a long time. Then she held out her hand. "Not fully. Not forever. Just enough." Alexander looked at it as if she had offered him a kingdom far greater than the one he ruled. When he took it, his touch was warm, careful, and shaking almost imperceptibly. No claim burned across her skin. No magic forced an ending she had not chosen. Only a man holding the hand of the woman he had failed, and a woman deciding that healing did not have to mean returning unchanged to who she had been. Months later, when the trial ended, Serena and Marcus were found guilty of conspiracy, falsifying royal records, and endangering the heirs through concealment of lawful correspondence. They were stripped of rank and sent from court under permanent banishment, their names removed from succession councils and royal advisory records. Frostpine received a new clinic before winter ended. Mrs. Calloway was brought to the palace as the boys' honorary grandmother, a title Liam insisted was legally binding. And on the first full moon of spring, before a court that no longer dared whisper Evelyn's name with contempt, Alexander asked her again, not to be claimed, not to be crowned as repayment, but to stand beside him because she chose to. Evelyn looked at Noah and Liam, both shining in formal blue coats, then at the man who had spent every day proving that regret could become action. This time, when she placed her hand in Alexander's, the old magic did not feel like a chain. It felt like a door opening. The court bowed as Evelyn Harper became Luna of Blackthorn Realm, not because a king finally gave her value, but because she had carried it through exile, protected it in her sons, and returned with enough truth to make an entire kingdom kneel.